We're missing an alderman here. Well, I'd like to call the Community and Economic Development Committee back to order. Could we please have a roll call?
Alderman Subak? Okay. Alderman Coles? Here. Alderman Winger? Alderman Knipe?
Here.
Alderman Peisig? Alderman Wesley?
Here.
Alderman Shockey?
Here.
Alderman Talamy?
Here. I think at this point, what I'd like to do, before we go on with this, we were discussing the CTE engineering grade separation study, and I think at this time, what I'd like to do is, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to make a motion to accept 2A as the choice, and I would look for a second.
Second.
And then I'll open it up for questions. Alderman Wesley?
I have a couple questions. If we could go to slide 2A for a moment. You said that there will be 47 houses affected to be buyed out and 13. Okay?
I said 47 residences, not houses.
All right, 47 residents and 13 businesses. That is where the road's going, am I correct?
Can you repeat the question, please?
My question is, the 47 residents that you're going to buy out and 13 businesses, are those the houses that are going to be along that road going around?
That's correct.
Okay, but what about all those other houses in the middle, residents and businesses in the corner there?
I believe you're referring to the area in
Yes.
here and here.
Yes.
Those numbers are not included in the 47. The 47 is strictly for the roadway improvement itself.
So more or less, we still could take residents out of there and businesses out of there in this project. Am I correct?
The roadway project and the station area study are two independent projects. That's why our displacements only involve the roadway, because the roadway can be done without the study in the middle. They're two independent projects.
But back me up here too, maybe I'm wrong, but with the engineering that is going along with this project, aren't they jointly together to come out with this program?
We're together in the planning phase because we need to make sure that their ideas fit with our overall infrastructure. But they're two completely independent projects.
Okay.
Maybe can I follow up with that?
And then, wait a minute, one other question. Just so everyone knows that when the committee was put together, no one in this ward was on there unless it was like 2 weeks after the last meeting that the person was put on the committee. So in the affected area that was affected before, there was no one on that committee that came up with that determination because the person that was put on was she attended 2 meetings, it was the last towards the end of the situation. So my question, and maybe no one can answer that question, in the other development that's in part with this, could someone answer to me on how many residents and businesses will be taken out in that other plan then? Is there a person here for that?
No, and I think Alderman Wesley, you're missing the point here. We're not here tonight, at this point, to discuss the impact on the rest of the area. We're really not. What we're here to discuss is the impact of who's going to be impacted if we choose 2A, 2, or we do nothing. And I think what you're saying, here's how it could go. We can do 2A, and you have the amount of homes and buildings that have already been discussed that would be taken out. And that's exactly what could happen, and that's all that could ever happen. The rest of the residents that live in that area, that new area, they can stay there as long as they want. They can continue to live there as long as they want. The businesses that are there today can stay there as long as they want. That's a whole different issue. That is something you talk about when you're talking about, and we've talked about before at other committee meetings, as far as your transit-oriented development or your downtown area, or redevelopment of your area. It has nothing to do with making this decision on alternate 2A or 2 at this point. It really doesn't, because every one of those individuals that would not be bought out by the state or, for this project can stay there as long as they want to stay there. There's nothing that says they have to move. No, this is not a, well, okay, now you're going to have to move tomorrow because, we just moved Irving Park Road to the north of you.
Yeah, but the whole purpose of this is really being pushed for is to redevelop downtown area. So I think, because we have talked on here, if we go with the 2A, we could redevelop the whole downtown area.
Correct, that is true.
Okay, but the problem is now, let's look as a full council here, let's look at the full picture of redeveloping this road, that's fine, but also look at the downtown area on how many people we may replace down the line before you make the decision, guys.
But
Look at the overall picture
But
and
see,
put both of them together.
okay, but see, you're trying to put the proverbial cart before the horse, and you really can't do that, because there is no guarantee that you're going to have any kind of redevelopment happen in that area. It's wishful thinking, and we've talked about it, but it's wishful thinking that it would happen, okay, in the future. But there is no guarantee that it would happen. And yes, every one of those people, they have the right to live there, and the only way they would be moved, okay, is if a developer or somebody else came in and offered them to buy them out. And there's nothing that says that's going to happen. Alderman Shockey?
You mentioned that if a developer is going to come in and buy them out, and if they don't want to sell, what would happen?
Then they don't sell.
Then the road doesn't go through that area, their house stays there?
No.
No.
Alderman
Let me
Shockey,
skip
no.
that. Let me skip that. That's okay. We're looking at something here that isn't what we've been looking at all along. I disagree with you there, because there's a lot of different things on here that we had never considered before. And you're talking about, you put up a timeline before. Can we get that timeline back up again? Okay. You're saying early in 2007 we need to make a decision, so this isn't something we need to do tonight. And also, Dave, you were talking about, will this ever be, will we ever get the money for this? Number one, we are politically unfunded anymore. We've lost our power to be that I think we could have perhaps gotten money through. And secondly, they're going to be building an overpass or underpass at York Road because of the airport, and there's no question that will take precedent over anything done in Wooddale. So any money that does come down is going to be over there first. So we're talking about all of these houses, not just the ones in the roadway, but everything in between there, as well as all the businesses, having to sit there and wonder whether this is ever going to happen. Is this going to happen in 2 years from now? Is it going to happen in 10 years from now? We have a traffic problem, and I understand that traffic accident problem is really not at the train tracks itself. Yeah, it goes beyond that, and there's rear-end collisions because of the long backups, and I think the backups are even longer than you're talking about, really. They go down to Montrose going north on Wooddale Road, and the backups go all the way up to City Hall going south on Wooddale Road. So even 2A isn't going to solve that problem because it's still longer than that. The backup will be beyond, up to the library probably. There's so much here that we have to absorb and look at and understand. I would like to make a motion to table, as long as this decision doesn't have to be made tonight, to table it to a later date so we can really look at this and discuss it and talk about what we're doing here. I was just wondering if there's somebody who'd like to make a second on that motion to table.
I second that.
Oh, motion, there's a motion on the floor to table.
Certainly, okay.
I'll ask for roll call vote.
Alderman Subak.
No.
Alderman Coles. Alderman Winger.
No.
Alderman Knipe.
No.
Alderman Peisig. Alderman Wesley.
Yes.
Alderman Shockey.
Yes.
Alderman Ptolemy.
No.
Chairman.
Motion failed. Alderman Subak?
First of all, I understand if certain aldermen need more time, but to have a presentation being done, to have some of us that are prepared and ready to make a decision, I think it's blatantly unfair to try to do a motion to table midstream to try to get this cut off. I don't mind if it was a motion to table at the end of discussion to say we need more time, but to do it midstream, certainly in my opinion, is not fair. With respect to one of the questions that Alderman Wesley raised, if you go back to the 2A in the center, IDOT will not buy out any of those homes in the middle, correct?
That's correct.
And I think the way the current laws are changing with respect to eminent domain, we're not going to have, or the future council will not have the ability to do eminent domain to take anybody on the interior for economic development only. So I think that Alderman Ptolemy is correct that those people in the center, if they wanted to stay there, they could. Now, they are probably the ones that will benefit the most if there is redevelopment, because probably the price for that would probably be the highest. But again, we don't know if that's ever really going to happen. With respect to Alderman Shockey's comment on the York and Irving Park Road, I believe that project is being funded through the O'Hare Modernization Program, not through this same program. So I don't think, I always had doubts that I still have doubts whether or not we'll get this money, but I don't think we can compare those two projects because they're not on the same track. And with respect to the money, I was impressed with what the mayor has done to date in getting funding. I hope that can continue. But I know what I found out in the years working on this project is you can't get this funding unless all these studies are done. And every time you see an accident at an intersection with the railroad, they start listing all these dangerous places. In the last newspaper article I think I saw in the Daily Herald, it talked about which towns had studies going on. And I think we were only one of 3 that were this kind of far along in the project. I think the last accident in Elmwood Park, they haven't even looked at that yet. So we're actually ahead of the curve trying to solve some of these problems. Thank you.
Alderman Coles?
I was on this committee, and I've gone to all them committees at junior high school, including majority of the aldermen, and this thing has come up, and you've read, they've gave you pictures, they've gave you what they thought was the right place to put the road, and this holding back because you don't have the print or you're worried about a parking lot being changed. This is a thing that you have to look for the future. The future of Wooddale is not going to stand still. If you don't go ahead, we're just going to be left behind and we're going to have nothing but problems. And eventually, the town will sink, just like other towns have some. So either you vote for it or you don't vote for it. You either say yes or you say no. And if the future of Wooddale wants to continue on, I would suggest we all vote yes. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman?
Alderman Subak?
I had one follow-up question. With respect to like the Division Street going through close to the school, this is very in the early stages. Once you start your phase 2 engineering, you might find out that that road needs to go further south or further north. It's not, none of these exact locations are set at this point, correct?
Well, when you mentioned phase 2, you're correct in that this is still a concept, but we would like to have the final alignment nailed down by the time of phase 1.
Okay.
Because that's going to set which right-of-way you need to buy. If we get beyond phase 1 and we determine that we want to change the alignment Division Street, that reopens the phase 1. So for that reason, we want to have everything nailed down by that timeline I gave you, which was early of '08.
Okay.
So, Matt, I'd just like to follow up with that. If you could go back to
Sure.
that. When you're looking at during the first, phase one here, you're looking at division, that's when you're going to realize, hey, maybe we do need, instead of taking it directly into the right-of-way where it is today, maybe we do need to take it more on an angle coming in or a loop coming in and keep it a little bit further away from the church area. Correct? That's when the time would be done?
That's correct.
Okay, so I want to make sure that, the people on this committee do understand, that what you see up there is not necessarily cut in stone, okay? This is the concept of what what is being looked at, but it all comes down to the engineering. And I don't think there's any one of us that's on this committee that's an engineer. I said earlier, that this is something that we as a council are faced with in making a decision that probably is one of the toughest decisions that we as elected officials are going to ever have to make in our careers, okay, really, for the city. And when you're up here, you have to look and you have to weigh, it's funny because when I was years ago, I used to think, well, I always hated government when they'd come in and take somebody's home or they'd take somebody's business, and use the guys that, well, it's in the best interest of all. But here is a situation where when you're put into that spot where you have to make that decision, that you realize that it's not easy. It's not an easy decision to make. Yes, we will be impacting residents in the city. We will be impacting businesses in the city. But if we're true to what we swore was our duty as councilmen to do, and that's represent the entire city and in the best interest of the city, we have to look at what is truly in the best interest of the city long term. And I honestly believe that when you look at the long term for the city, and I'm not talking, 5, 10 years down the road, I'm talking 15, 20, 30 years down the road where, maybe some of us won't even be here, one way or another. It is truly in the best interest of the city long term to try and do the right thing. Does that make it right? I don't know. But you got to go based on your gut. You got to go based on what you honestly believe in your heart is the right thing to do for the city long term. Yes, we're going to impact people short term. I've already talked with the city manager. Matt's aware of this. I've said this at all the meetings we've had, that we plan on meeting with all the impacted residents, okay, that would be impacted by this, the businesses, to sit down and not just sit down and say, hey, guess what? The state's coming in, they're going to buy you out. It's to sit down with them and have candid conversations on, okay, this is what we're looking at doing. What can we do in addition to what the state is going to do in terms of their buyout? What can we do as a city to help these individuals if they want to relocate back in the city? Now, Alderman Wesley, we had our ward meeting. You heard me at our ward meeting. I said it to all the residents that were there. I said that very thing. We will have a meeting with the residents. We'll have a meeting with the businesses. We will talk with them. We will do whatever we can. And whether I'm on this council or not, I will do, as a citizen of this community, I will do whatever I can to make sure that we try and do, as a city, we try and do the right thing for the residents and for the businesses that are going to be impacted. It's imperative that we do, because nobody wants to take anybody's home, nobody wants to take anybody's business, but when you look at what's going on with that situation, with that intersection today, when you look at what's going on with the area today, the regional area today, we as a community have to make a decision. And I honestly, in my heart, I believe that this is 2A represents the best decision, the best offers the city, the best future of what the city can truly be. Does it mean that area is going to be redeveloped? God only knows. God only knows. Okay? Does it offer an opportunity for that development to happen? Yes, it does. Does that mean survival for the city long term? Financial stability for the city long term? Yes. We just went through an election where we had asked the residents to raise the sales tax because we were at a situation where if it wouldn't have passed, we may have been forced next year to cut services, to cut staff further than we have cut it today. And I don't want to see future councils or the residents to be burdened in the future with having to make cutbacks or eliminate services. We have an opportunity to do the right thing now. Let's do it. We've sat up here and we've talked about councils in the past and some of the poor decisions we felt they made. You want to make the right decision, you do what you feel you have to do. But let me tell you, someday, if we decide to do nothing, someday, future council, future residents are going to look back and say, those people had a chance to make the right decision for this community, and they blew it. They didn't do it. So that's all I'm going to say. And Alderman Winger?
Thank you. I'm convinced that we need to do something. If you look comparatively at other intersections in Illinois, this is clearly a very dangerous intersection. There is a strong reason to do something versus, nothing. We do need to do something. We look at the Elmwood Park debacle that happened there and certainly don't want it to happen here. With regard to 2 and 2A, this is a tremendous amount of work either way you look at it. And when you do the undertaking and you take the years to do this, I'm convinced you need to do it correctly and to the most optimum return on our investment. With that being said, I saw figures looking at long term. When we look at 2030, we're showing that if we go option 2, we're going to get the D rating. We'd go back to almost how poor it is now, just a little better, marginal effect when you look at 2030. But if you look at option 2A, this is where we see a better effect. And if we're going to go through all of the construction, I'm convinced that we need to do this to get the optimal effect. And concur with Alderman Ptolemy as well with working with the residents and working with the businesses and to make this as seamless as possible. Thank you.
Mayor Johnson?
This is a project, obviously, that's been causing a great deal of concern within the community for how long? We've been working this 6 years now? Something like that? And one of the things that I hear over and over in the business community when I attend the chamber meetings or I go to the coffee shop or whatever is please tell us what is the route going to be so that we can go forward with our business plans. When you look at the bowling alley, or you look at Suburban Bank, or you look at Christie's Restaurant, or you look at Bank of Commerce, they all want to know what is the route going to be. Tell us, give us that information, and then we can go forward with our plans, whether we need to relocate or whether we're going to go ahead and remodel. And unfortunately, not going forward with this plan and not having a decision to date has stagnated some development within the central business district. So I think we need to go forward with making the decision. I was one of the advocates of 2 because it didn't take out any homes. I've since changed my beliefs, largely because of the engineering report. When you tell me that 2 is only going to do a marginal safety improvement from an F to a D or to an E or whatever, that is something we need to consider. What is going to affect the future of Wooddale over the next 25 or 50 years, which I believe this project is going to do. Yes, it's going to be inconvenient for a lot of residents. Yes, it's going to be displacement for them. It's going to be upsetting of their lives. There's absolutely no doubt about it. But for the long-term benefit of the community, John Kennedy once said, ask not what you can do for your country, or ask not what your country should do for you, ask what you can do for your country. And a lot of it is the same here. Yes, it is going to be inconvenient for you. Yes, it is a hardship for you. But long-term, for the safety of the community, this is going to be an improvement. Hopefully, tragically, we wouldn't have a minivan full of kids and a family wiped out at that intersection, or a school bus on their way to Fenton High School or the grade school. But if we don't go forward with this, certainly that possibility exists. And eliminating the conflict between the railroad and Irving Park does eliminate that possibility and makes Wooddale a safer community. And I want to talk a little bit about the funding. Just for review, we received $4 million from the state of Illinois. We received $11.3 million in the federal transportation bill. That is law. That money is there. That has not been changed. And that is another reason why we need to go forward with this decision, is because the next federal transportation bill is most likely to come forward within the next 2 years. If a plan is in place, if the engineering is in place, if the right-of-way has been done, and we do have funding to do the right-of-way acquisition and the engineering, then the next logical step is to fund the construction. And that's what we'll be seeking in the new federal transportation bill. So for all of these reasons, I'm going to be advocating and encouraging you to support 2A for the long-term benefit of the community on an economic scale, for the safety of our citizens who go through this intersection on a daily basis, and for the betterment of our existing business community who want this decision to be made so they can go forward with their economic lives. So I would encourage you to vote for 2A.
At this point, I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to call the question.
I have one more question. I'm sorry.
Okay, Alderman Subak, and then I'm going to call the question.
We're not doing anything with the intersection at Wooddale Road. Does 2A, if this gets done and in 30 years all of a sudden Wooddale Road's a problem, does 2A still allow a future council to say, this council blew it, they should have done an underpass at Wooddale Road? Does 2A still allow that at some point to maybe be done down the road if need be?
It's difficult to say. We haven't specifically planned for that contingency in 2A. I know that we've planned, like I say, we've projected out to 2030, and this does not indicate a problem on Wooddale Road because that's the lower of the roads. But that's not to say that something couldn't be re-engineered
In the future?
in the future. But to answer your question, no, we have not factored in that contingency in our plan.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, call the question. Roll call, please. Well, first off, the motion on the floor is to accept 2A as the city's choice.
Second.
Well, there's a
I
second on
seconded
it.
it. Oh, good, okay.
Just reaffirming that.
Alderman Subak,
Yes.
Alderman Coles,
Yes.
Alderman Winger,
Yes.
Alderman Knipe,
Yes.
Alderman Peisig, Alderman Wesley,
No.
Alderman Shockey,
No?
Alderman Ptolemy.
Yes. Motion passes. Thank you. Thank you very much. Alderman
If
Shockey?
I may, a motion to table is allowable, if I'm not mistaken, at any time, and it's not something that's unfair. It's completely fair to call a motion to table, so to call it unfair, I think, is barking up the wrong tree.
Okay, okay. That's it, Matt. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We'll make the, at this point, I think what I'd like to do is go on with the economic development consultant, get them out of here.
Item number 4.
Don't you want to get the
TOD.
other guys out of here first?
They're not speaking tonight. They're just observing.
Okay. All right. So at this point then, I'd like to go and we talk about the report and recommendation. This is in the transit-oriented development, TOD, the zoning. You know, as I stated last week, when we canceled the meeting and pushed it off to tonight, I had asked everybody to really look at the material because what I'd really hope for tonight is that we could have a good discussion on this because this is something that potentially can impact or is going to impact us and again, the future of the city. So Jeff, I'm going to turn it over to you and let you open with your remarks.
Okay. I just want to go over a few things before we hit a PowerPoint by Community Development Assistant Ross and go over the ordinance in detail. Irregardless of what decision is made on Irving Park Road, if we get the funding or not, it's quite obvious that we need some redevelopment there. A key component to any redevelopment is land use planning. As part of that planning, staff believes guidelines need to be established to help promote basic redevelopment. Staff has put together a PowerPoint presentation to highlight what some other communities are doing and what recommendations staff believes will work in Wooddale. Before the PowerPoint and ordinance review, I'd like to give a quick review of what a TOD is and what it's supposed to do. A TOD will promote development of a compact, pedestrian-orientated town center consisting of a high-intensity employment center, vibrant and dynamic mixed-use areas, and residential living environments that provide a broad range of housing types for an array of housing needs. It will also promote a diverse mix of residential, business, commercial, office, institutional, educational, and cultural and entertainment activities for workers, visitors, and Wooddale residents. It also will encourage pedestrian-oriented development within walking distance of transit opportunities at densities that will help to support the transit usage in town center businesses. It will also promote the health and well-being of residents by encouraging physical activity, alternative transportation, and greater social interaction. It will also create a place that represents a unique, attractive, and memorable destination for visitors and residents. And finally, it will enhance the community's character through the promotion of high-quality urban design. This time I'm going to turn over to Ross Clicker.
As Jeff mentioned, one of the things that will be vital to any redevelopment efforts will be a new zoning district for the TOD area. What is important with this TOD area is offering the developers enough that they will want to do the developments, offering the densities high enough to support any businesses in the area, and offering controls and incentives for the developers to present a quality development. The first slide that I have for you is actually really what we don't want. If there are no design controls, if there are no incentives to the developers to add public amenities such as plazas, architectural features, setbacks, whatever the case may be, this is what you can wind up with. The developer will maximize their profit. They will absolutely push the envelope to how much they can put on a parcel. So what you can then do is start adding some architectural controls. It makes for a much more attractive building, but again, the developer is going to maximize their profits and not necessarily be concerned about the community. If you do have some decent architectural controls in place, you have to also be careful to make sure to offer or require the developer to create some public plazas, some public spaces, because what you can wind up